So welcome participants, welcome to the third webinar on LEI. And today we will discuss the cases in EU. So hopefully you can also get the another perspective. The last webinar, we had the speakers from the United States, and we could listen to a very interesting possible scenario that the US custom may introduce global identifier like LEI or others. And currently they are making sort of evaluation. So that is really the case to expand the use of LEI beyond the financial regulations. Also, we had the presentation by the JP Morgan Chase. So they are also acting as a validation agent. So actually banks need to do the customer due diligence. So without extra cost, the banks can help customers to get the LEI. And that certainly creates the benefit to the customer, also banks. And so that the probably that is also another approach that we may be able to support also in Asia. And today we will listen to the European cases. One is is sort of from kind of a regulator's perspective, how LEI needs to be mandated for various regulatory reporting. And also, we will listen to the case on the private sector, how the use of LEI can maximize the benefit for the private sector, sort of digital transformation or treasury management. For those who participated previous webinar, I suppose now you are quite familiar how to raise questions. So if you have questions, please type in Q&A box. Whatever the questions related to the LEI, please feel free to raise the question. It doesn't have to be related to today's topic. I'm happy to provide answers. And also the previous meetings, do you have some remaining questions? Please feel free to type in. Well, unfortunately, the the participants are not allowed to speak. So please type in whatever the questions. And we will respond during the Q&A session. If we cannot finish all the questions, we will provide the answer via email. So let's see. Okay, maybe I can start. So first of all, thank you so much for your kind participation. Today, as I mentioned, we will listen to the cases, experiences in Europe. We have two speakers, Mr. Francois Roman. He's the Senior Manager, Statistics Department of European Central Banks. Thank you, Francois, for joining the webinar. And another speaker is Mr. Guillermo Fonte. He's the Senior Treasury and the Risk Manager of CITA. He'll explain the perspective from the private sector. So likewise, we will have two presentations, and then we move to the Q&A session. So first, I'd like to give the floor to Francois. He will explain the European Systemic Risk Board recommendation on identifying legal entities. So Francois, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tomo. Thanks for giving me the floor. First, I would like to start by thanking the ADBs, the Asian Development Bank, and the Global LEI Foundation for their invitation and for the opportunity to speak at your seminar. about the ESRB recommendation on LEI. And I would like to particularly thank Tomo Yamadera-san and Ms. Sheila Sambio for their support, and notably today in sharing my slides, because my equipment does not allow me to share documents with Zoom. From that anecdote, you might guess that I'm from a central bank. And indeed, I'm François Laurent. I work at the European Central Bank. I've been working in a number of central banks before, or central banks organizations such as the Banque de France, the BIS, the European Monetary Institute, very much in the IT department. But now I have a responsibility, a global responsibility for the bank related to data management, especially to data standardization. In that context, I represent the bank, the ECB, in a number of organizations related to standardization, notably the ISO, and I'm part of the ISO Technical Committee 68, which deals with financial services, and I'm also chairing the Regulatory Oversight Committee, the ROC, that has a responsibility for international governance over a number of identifiers, which includes the LEI, but not only. There is now also the unique transaction identifiers, the unique product identifier, other data elements related to OTC derivatives. But here we are talking about LEI, and the ROC is also responsible for the oversight of LEI on the global LEI system. But today I will not be speaking to you in my capacity as ROC chair, but more as a member of the ECB, and I have been chairing a task force of the European Systemic Risk Board that has put in place a recommendation regarding the LEI. Maybe a couple of words about very briefly about what is the ESRB. So the ESRB is a body that is responsible for the macroprudential oversight of the EU financial system, and therefore of the prevention of and mitigation of systemic risks. So this is a broad remit that covers not only banks, but also insurers, asset managers, financial market infrastructures, other financial institutions and markets. And with a view to pursue its mandate, the ESRB monitors and assesses systemic risks and can, wherever appropriate, issue either warnings or recommendations. And here, maybe a word about what a recommendation is, because that's what we're going to be speaking about today. A recommendation is issued to either the EU as a whole, or to specific member states, or to specific authorities within the EU to remedy to significant system risks that have been identified. And then the addressees of the recommendation have either to act or explain why they can't fully act on the recommendation, but that is scrutinized and assessed by the ESRB. So that's to set the scene, and then I would like to put a bit of background on. Tomo, if you could move to the next slide. So I will speak about motivation of what has led to this ESRB recommendation on LEI and on the task force that led the work, give you an overview of that recommendation, and then a final word about a paper that is upcoming, which supports this recommendation. So next slide. And here, what I would like to say is to set a bit the scene. Why has the ESRB been interested in looking at the LEI and mandating the LEI? What is clear is that the economy has become global, and capital, goods, services flow from a point of the globe to the other, with an ever growing speed, complexity, and interdependency between entities. And that, if this is not properly controlled, and if there are difficulties in some parts of this web, of this interconnected network, then this may lead to problems and then financial contagion. And we have all the entities are nowadays linked. We have seen through the crisis with the Lehman Brothers case, where at the end of the day, banks were not even aware of their total exposure because there were complexities in the reporting, in the fact that we didn't know always who is owning whom, who is exposed to what in that context, and that has led to the crisis we all know too well, and therefore the ESRB has taken the view that something should be done in that context, and that the identification unambiguously and clearly the identification of legal entities and who owns what and who is exposed to what is key to having a proper oversight of the systemic risks in the financial sector. Next slide, please. Thank you. Furthermore, and also, I would say, justifying or explaining why the ESRB wanted to move on that. As I said, it has identified that as a key issue for pursuing its mandate, but he's also wanted to respond to an FSB review that was made in 2020, where it published a thematic peer review listing a set of challenges that is still faced by the system of the LEI. So on this is notably the fact that although it has started well, it still requires a bit of more sustainable growth, notably having more entities getting an LEI. And as we speak now, I think there are about 1.9 million entities that have an LEI. It's far from being the entirety of legal entities across the world, so there is still an effort to do there. And in the view to also reply to the FSB review on LEI, then the ESRB has wanted to look at the issue. Next slide. As I said, the challenges that we have been facing with the LEI is the low adoption outside, I would say, the financial sector, but even more precisely, or at least that's where it started, it was around the securities and OTC derivatives market. And we see that there have been burst issuance at the time that regulations were issued. And you see in this diagram, a big burst. This big burst corresponds to the MiFID regulation, where it was under the motto "No LEI, no trade." It created a big burst for requests for LEI for all those companies that wanted to play a role on the OTC derivative markets under MiFID. But there is obviously a need to sustain this growth, and the voluntary adoption is not yet there. Furthermore, we also realize that while the interlinkages between financial entities and non-financial entities is key, and big companies, big firms, if there is a problem at their level, it also has repercussion on the financial institutions. And this network that I was speaking about, this interlinked network of entities, is spreading far beyond the financial entities. And today, LEI is mainly adopted, or has been mainly used by financial institutions, and we need to go beyond that. And therefore, the ESRB mandated a task force to work on that and to propose an ESRB recommendation on the LEI. And I had a chance to chair that task force. The task force was also attended by a representative of the financial authorities in Europe, so the IOPA, which is the Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority in Europe. We've got the EBA participated, the European Banking Authority, ESMA, the European Securities Market Authority. We had the European Commission, and then a number of central banks that participated in that. So just to show the large buy-in of the various institutions into this work and into the work of the ESRB task force. If I may ask you to move to the next slide. So the mandate of the task force, I already mentioned the members. As you can see, EBA, EIOPA, and a number of central banks. They are named here: Banca d'Italia, Banque de France, Deutsche Bundesbank, and of course the ESRB Secretariat played a big role there. The mandate was very much to draft an ESRB recommendation to promote the LEI adoption within the European Union. And I said drafting because it was in the end to be adopted by the ESRB General Board, but we had to prepare that, and the ESRB General Board approved the recommendation that we drafted, and that was approved in September 2020 and was published to the official journal of the European Union on the 26th of November 2020. Next slide. So what is this recommendation saying? This recommendation is telling us that is recommending to the European Commission to propose a global union legislation, so a legislation that is applicable to all the EU, where it would impose the identification via an LEI of legal entities established in the European Union and involved in financial transactions. So what does that mean? That means almost every legal entity should have an LEI, to make it a bit blunt, because a legal entity involved in financial transactions, I would say, if you take it largely, every entity that has a bank account and is making payments or receiving payments is involved in financial transactions one way or another. So very much the idea is to cover as much as possible the EU-wide landscape of legal entities. I just jumped to the last point on this slide. Just I come back on the other ones, but just to say, okay, one can ask, is it really worse, and is it really realistic? And of course, here what we also said is that the principle of proportionality needs to apply. It needs to be proportionate with the effort and the cost need to be proportionate with the benefits that we get out of that. But it's clear that every big, medium and big size entity would need to be registered via an LEI. And then that the reporting obligations of financial information should be done via the LEI of that entity, and also public disclosures of information on legal entities by authorities should also be made via the LEI. So as you can see, it's a quite wide spreading recommendation, which in turn should help having a very broad coverage on a high percentage of legal entities established in the European Union to have an LEI. Next slide. Thank you. Of course, we understand that putting in place such a legislation will take some time, and therefore we also wanted to get the ball rolling in the meantime. And there is a second part in the ESRB recommendation that asks that pending the action of the European Commission, on that means pending EU-wide legislation to be put in place regarding the LEI, we also recommend to authorities, so that is central banks, national authorities, this is also European authorities, EBA, ESMA, EIOPA, which I mentioned before. So we recommend those authorities to require that all entities under their supervisory remit have an LEI, so that the reporting obligations on public disclosures are also being made via the LEI. So that is also making sure that the necessary, sorry, I've got a little technical stuff, but I will manage. making sure that all the authorities and people that have a mandate of supervision over legal entities request them to have an LEI. So next slide, thank you. So that is the recommendation in itself. That's what it says. That's what it requires. But we realize that just like this may require a bit of further information, and therefore the task force has also been working on what we call an ESRB occasional paper. So it's a document where the task force has also put further information regarding the background, regarding the business case, regarding the challenges, and how the recommendation would be addressing some of the challenges to achieve greater uptake of the LEI within the European Union. So therefore, a paper is, and I was hoping today to tell you, it has been published, but unfortunately, we still have to wait a couple of days. I've been promised it would be in the early days of July, but I've been told that it would be before the end of June, so I can't promise anymore, but I sincerely hope this paper will be available soon, and it contains a number of information that would supplement not only the recommendation, but also probably my presentation today. So I would encourage you to have a look. I will pass on the link to the paper to the organizers of this seminar, so that they can, if you want to follow up, they can pass them to you, pass the link to you, so that you can download and read this paper. It's going to be available on the ESRB website, as I said, any day now. But it addresses, all those points on further develops the background, further develops the benefits and challenges, and on solutions that could be put in place. It notably addresses the question of validation agents and the roles that banks could play into that. And I understand you had Ami speaking to you about the JP Morgan case earlier on. And that is also developed, that paper, but also the role that business registers in Europe could play in that, and notably by having a sort of automatic registration. Or we need to find ways of addressing that, and we are currently looking within the system at ways of involving more business registers in that, and making sure that we can have also bulk registrations, for example, of LEIs. That means also that we need to consider the financial aspects of the LEI, because as I said earlier on, the proportionality principle needs to apply, and of course the cost issue is, even if it's often used too loudly as an impediment, I think it's from time to time an excuse that is not necessarily always valid, but it's here and there valid, and I think we need to look at that, and on the question of the costing model for the LEI. I know is being looked at by the GLEIF, and shall be further addressed to make sure that we've got even a greater uptake. And with that, I think I would like to close my presentation for today. Of course, I will take up any questions you may have, and we'll be happy to answer that either online or also later on. If Tomo-san wants to send me questions that I would need to answer, I would be more than happy to do so. But with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and close my presentation for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Francois. So let us move on to the next session. So Guillermo, he will explain the private sector perspective. So floor is yours.
Hello. Good morning here in Europe. Good afternoon to our colleagues in Asia. Thank you very much to the Asian Development Bank, and thank you to GLEIF for letting me share my experience from a corporate point of view. I think bringing examples, real examples from corporates, I think it will bring some light to these webinars, and I think it's a good way to give some colors to all the presentations that you may attended in the last days. Yes, let me introduce myself first. My name is Guillermo de la Fuente, working in finance for more than 30 years, mainly in treasury, working for multinationals, corporates like General Electric, Fluor, Sita, or Shell, working for banks like JP Morgan, working for international organizations like the European Laboratory for Physical Particles, CERN, and mainly devoted to treasury aspects. My last 6 years I've been working for Sita. Sita is a cooperative older than 70 years, and is the leader in the world providing IT and telecommunication services to the air transport industry. Sita is present everywhere there is an airport, everywhere there is airline. We are providing services to both, and Sita is mainly a B2B organization, so probably you never heard of it, but next time you go to an airport, trying to look at the screen, trying to look at the gates, try to look at the desk or the kiosk where you make the check-in, and you will start seeing the Sita logo everywhere. Without further presentation, I think we can jump into the most interesting part. I think everything you are expecting, which is our sample case. I have to say that I will be with Ivan Marin, who is the GLEIF representative who is supporting us in this development, and is really my technical support and the person who is really behind the scenes and helping me with the development and liaising with my IT department as well. So as I say, I'm a corporate treasurer with very limited IT skills. And that's the reason I need support of guys like Ivan or my guys in Sita, where the IT is really supporting treasury in most initiatives, and this one I think is worth to share with you. So let's jump into the next slide, please. Yeah, so I want to start with a simple example. No, I think most of you working in finance or in treasury have been suffer this. I think you receive an email, you call it the business email compromise, impersonating or whatever. You receive suddenly an email from one of your suppliers saying, yeah, well, our bank account has been changed, we changed our bank, whatever. They bring you an history, but at the end you receive an email saying, please note that our bank account has been changed, so the next payment should be to this bank account. And sometimes they even list the invoices that they are outstanding. So as you can see, the signature comes from a person who you usually know because it's one of your suppliers. You have a phone number, you have the address, you have everything that looks real stuff. But if you move to the next slide, please, you will see that it is a fraud. The email is not coming from our supply, from our person that we know, because as you can see in their domain, they change a little bit the domain address. So at the end, you have received a fake email. And in most cases, your master data team already made the changes in the system, and unfortunately, the payment will go somewhere else. It won't go to your supplier. And some days your supplier will be calling, asking you where you're gonna pay him. And you say, no, I did already pay. And they say, no, I didn't receive anything. And a few months later, you discover that, in fact, you didn't pay to your real supplier, you pay to have the fake one. And you will start asking your bank to collect or refund. It will be too late, and it's a big mess. So this is something I think most of you are aware, because the business email compromise, this kind of fraud is the most broader fraud that we are facing in Treasury, and we are all aware of it, and we've been trying to put in place different best practice to avoid it. We usually call the guy in the email to double check that their email is real, but now these people, they know it, and they also give you fake phone numbers, and the voice is also simulated. So at the end, they become very sophisticated, and all the different procedures that you put in place to avoid this kind of fraud, unfortunately, are really difficult to stop. So for that reason, we've been approaching different solutions, providers, with many different solutions that came to us. But at the end, as a treasury, as a risk manager, I find out that the best solution that we could adopt at CETA was the solution provided by GLEIF. And as I say, this was after many different trials and errors, after realizing that all the best practices that were provided to us were not as robust as the one provided by GLEIF. In fact, this solution was not provided by GLEIF itself, because everything started 1 year ago when GLEIF make a presentation about e-billing, and then I say, why don't we use this technique to make sure that the bank, the changes in bank address are implemented in a safe way. And that's the reason I started with Ivan looking for ways to enhance the way that we make changes in our master data base for bank changes or new bank address for suppliers, and make sure that we were paying to the right supplier without any fraud. So jumping to the third slide, please. Yes, another one, please. Yes, so as I say, we sit down with Ivan and we try to find out the best way to implement that in CETA. So CETA use Oracle as a ERP, and it is there where we need to create the database with the LEI of our suppliers at the bank accounts. So very simple. What we wanted to do is trust our supplier and the information that was provided by our supplier. And in order to trust him, we need to have his authentic seal. And in order to do that, the seal of our supplier should be provided by a third party who really ensure us that that seal or that email that we receive from our supplier is authentic. And this is something that is done by a certificate authority, like a register, or depending in each country, the authority is shared with different organizations. So first of all, we need that the supplier has their email certified by a trusted source, which is the certificate authority. And secondly, we need that the supplier identifies with a unique number, because you can have the certificate that the email you are receiving is from CETA, but because maybe there is another company, I don't know, in Malaysia which has also the CETA name, and at the end, you are thinking you are talking to the CETA in Europe, but at the end you are talking to the CETA in Malaysia, which has nothing to do with us. So to avoid that, that's the reason we have the LEI, and we use the LEI as a unique identifier. Everything has been said about LEI, so I'm not going to talk much about it, because obviously that LEI makes you sure that that counterparty is the one that you are receiving the email, and then this is where the automation is done, because that LEI that is entering into our ERP system will allow us to check directly in the database of GLEIF that email that we are receiving, and the LEI that is embedded belongs to the supplier that we wanted to pay, or we want to modify his bank account number. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the goal of this project was to secure the information regarding the bank account number provided by suppliers. As you say, just wanted to avoid the payment fraud in this specific case, which I say before is the most common one for the moment we are facing Treasury. And as I say, there are two requirements: the LEI and the seal. The LEI bringing by a supranational organization like GLEIF, and the seal or the digital certificate. I think you are all familiar with the digital certificate provided by usually your country certificate authority. Sorry. Just to make this for those who are not very familiar with certificate, digital is like the stamp that you put in your official documentation. In the past, for those who are a little bit the same age than me, that were familiar with letters. If you remember, in the past, we didn't receive emails, we received letters with the stamp, with the signature, and things work that way. Now you receive an email, and the email it may come from whoever, and that's the reason this seal, this e-seal, brings you back to the old-fashioned stamp that you put in any letter. So next slide, please. Here is a flow sequence in words. Next slide will be the flow sequence for IT specialists. But basically, the first step is the supplier has to fill in a document with the bank account number or the change in his bank account, as you do now. Now the second step is the certificate, the email that you receive with the digital certificate, and of course with the LEI of the company, of the supplier. The supplier send that to our master data team. We at CITA we pass it in our ERP system in Oracle. Everything is input in our system, and once that everything is input in our system, we check obviously that the LEI that we receive in that email belongs to the supplier that we want to modify or pay, and this is where we use the GLEIF API application, where you with a number, with the number or with the LEI number, you can quickly know the company, the address, everything you need to make sure that you are paying to the right company. And then if everything matches correctly, the validation is done in our system, and the payment of the modification is done. We will talk once the payment is done or the changes have been done. I will talk later about the next step, because we want to close the gap, and we want to go a little bit further with the security in payments, but I think it will be in the next slide. So if you can move to the next slide, I think, yeah, this is more a flowchart for technical experts, which I'm not going to talk much, because as I say, I'm not an expert, IT expert, but if Ivan wants to jump and shed some light, you are welcome, Ivan. Otherwise, I will move to the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Guillermo. Well, we can go back just to the previous slide, please. Thank you. So as Guillermo has mentioned, we are collaborating together, GLEIF and CITA, in order to create this use case. I'm working on business development for promoting this kind of POCs with different companies, and we found that CITA has an excellent opportunity to secure the data they collect from providers regarding the bank accounts. And this is an excellent example on how to secure the communication of the new account numbers to CITA and to avoid the fraud. Because we are adding at least 2 layers of security. First one is e-sealing digitally all the documents, in particular the document that is processed by the ERP at CITA. That document is e-sealed by the provider, so the e-seal should, as Guillermo has mentioned, must be provided by a certificate authority that brings you the guarantee of authentication, no repudiation, and integrity, all the values of that digital certificate, in this case for the e-seal. And in addition, we embed the LEI with all the benefits of having the LEI embedded. Mainly for the cross-border transaction is particularly important, because this regard, in addition to the e-seal advantages, you add on the top the LEI global database that is checked in real time, as you can see in the diagram, and it has been mentioned before in words by Guillermo. The flow goes first, the supplier gets from the LOU, a local operating unit, and issues LEI, gets the corresponding LEI from the certificate authority or trust service provided. The supplier gets the certificate of the e-seal and is embedded the LEI into the e-seal. And with that digital identity, is sealed every single document. In this particular, the document that states that the new bank account, the new IBAN, is present and it should be incorporated to the ERP and is communicated to the Oracle ERP and is parsed. The document and is sent, is extracted, signature is validated, is communicated in real time with the GLEIF API. That it double checks everything, and everything matches. The sender is who claims to be, the LEI, it corresponds to that company, and all the process can be automated. This is very important, and we minimize a lot the chances of fraud. And finally, the process is finished and is communicated to SITA, and SITA can move forward with the payment. In the next slide, Guillermo will present how to close the loop with the bank.
Yes, thank you, Ivan. Yes, as I say, even though the process can be considered as finished from the GLEIF point of view, I think, I'm personally sitting in many different treasurers boards, in the Swiss treasurers board, in the European treasurers board, in the international treasurers board, and we are very concerned about payment fraud, as you can imagine. I've been focused on payment fraud in the last 4 years, and basically the business email compromise is the most common one. As you can see, it's not very sophisticated. It's not a malware. It's nothing but installed in your PC or anything like that. It's just an email, a simple email, very well developed, where you're thinking that you are talking to somebody else who you trust, and in fact it's not. It's just an impersonated person. So what we want to avoid is and mitigate this kind of fraud is not only with this solution that we just explained, bring it back GLEIF, but what we want to do also on top of it is talking to banks to make sure that they make what we call the confirmation of Payee. And that means that the banks make sure that the IBAN or the bank account number that we provided, it belongs to the real beneficiary or the account holder. And this is something that we want to do when this is something on top of this case, of course, but this is something I think it can be easily done if in the payments the LEI is included. So the bank can easily make the same exercise that we did at SITA, and which is checking that the beneficiary LEI matches with the account holder. That's all. And I'm not going to talk much about it because this is going to be maybe the next topic to be discussed in the future. So moving to the next slide, again, it's another flow. You want to say something more, Ivan?
Just a quick comment. So let me highlight that we have added 3 layers of security in this process to avoid the fraud. First, the e-seal that is issued and is backed by the certificate authority. Second, the LEI issued by the LOU that provides the LEI to the supplier and is embedded into the e-seal and works jointly to sign the document, to stamp digitally the document. And the third step is what you just mentioned in the previous slide, is the double check against the bank using the LEI extracted from the signature. So everything is coupled, everything matches. The bank double checks that the account corresponds and matches the expected supplier using the same LEI, technically connected to GLEIF's API. So with this, we close the whole security loop from the supplier to the recipient of the or issuer of the payment data and the bank as enabler of the payment. So we have 3 layers of security bundling this and protecting this transaction.
Yeah, exactly. So this is an additional factor of security that we want to do in a next phase. So I think the last slide, please, because I'm conscious of time. Yeah, as I say, we talk about the GLEIF 1 year ago, and we realized that a lot of solutions could be developed for corporates, not only making sure that the data from supplier, the bank data from some supplier is stored in a safety way and the payments are done in a secure way, but we have other alternatives that we are exploring at the same time, like the KYC process that could be using the LEI real-time database. I think it could help a lot of corporate treasurers in the way the KYC are filled in, or make them simpler, or even having a passport or something like that. As I said before, if we start using LEI in the payments, in the payment order that we give to banks, maybe ISO 222, we give another additional field with the LEI number of the beneficiary. That could be also very beneficial for reducing payment fraud. This is something already the Central Bank of India is implementing for certain amount of payments. Finally, we were talking also about invoicing, receiving invoices directly from the vendor in a safety way, without receiving an invoice that you don't know if it's coming from the real vendor or not. And finally, well, this bank data that we explained now. So I think that's all. Sorry to take a little bit more of time than we were allowed, but yeah, I think we get really very excited about it, and we start talking and finally, well, we talk too much. But in any case, we are open to any questions, and you can contact me either from the Treasurers Association or from my personal email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guillermo and Ivan, for your presentation. This really gives us the real example to how we can use the LEI. So let me move on to the Q&A session. Well, we received a few questions, I think. So the questions to the Francois, I guess this question is how we can sort of invite more sort of non-financial institutions, non-financial group to get the LEI, and you mentioned the kind of principle of the proportion. So we need to create more sort of incentive. So how are you going to do that? Also, the related to the next question, I think India is now implementing the LEI for high value payment. So like a T2S or T2 target payment, are you going to mandate all the high value payment transaction sort of incorporate LEI? So can you answer?
Yes, thank you very much, Tomo, for and thanks to those who have asked the questions. Thank you very much for those. Related to the question regarding non-financial entities, indeed, the ESRB has responsibility over over a number of entities, but which are in the financial sector. So has, I must say, the authorities that participated in the task force, EBA as authority or supervisory authority around banks, or supervisory oversight, and so on. So there are limited mandates of those authorities, and therefore we can't really have mandate that for the non-financial authorities, for entities that are outside the scope. But that's why the ESRB has issued a recommendation to the European Commission. So it's indeed, that's where we can have a large span of reaching out, and that's where the European Union is to, on the European Commission, sorry, is to propose an EU-wide legislation that will therefore touch every legal entity established in the EU. That is, and as I mentioned, involved in financial transactions. That means, because that's where we can justify that it is linked with financial stability, but every company, I would say, is involved one way or another in financial transactions. So that's the way. It's a way to push for that. And of course, as I said, the principle of proportionality needs to apply, so it needs to be commensurate with the effort on the price. But that's the way we could try to ensure that this is widespread. The best way would be to embed that into the company law of the European Union. On efforts on discussions are taking place with the European Union and with the European Commission to see whether a link with the company law could be made so that it's embedded that way. The second question, I think, was related to payment systems and market infrastructures. Yeah, as you know, the ECB is running, or the Euro system is running a number of market infrastructures in Europe, notably T2, which is a real-time gross settlement system. We have also T2S, which is the same, but for securities. We've got TIPS, which is for instant payments. We are further enhancing and developing these systems, and we will be migrating to ISO 20022, because currently we are on with 15022, which is a pre-runner of that standard, but very much moving towards 20022. And on the question of LEI, is of course on there, and on the idea is very much to offer the possibility that LEIs is embedded into those settlement messages, payment messages, and so on. Whether it's going to be mandatory, and that's another story, and it's always a question of do we have enough entities having an LEI, and therefore can we force it, or by forcing it we will create the demand and therefore bring it. So it's always the same story. Is it we ask it when it is available, or we make it mandatory so that it becomes available? That's a bit the question that is being run there. As you can guess, I'm advocating more for the second, so that it creates the incentive and the need for doing that. But that's a bit more political issue to be looking. If I may just complement with one last little bit, I'm sorry for being long, but I was talking about incentive and possibilities for non-financial corporations to request an LEI. Of course, the law avenue, the legislative avenue is something that we are contemplating, but anything that would be done also through voluntary adoption of the LEI would be also very, very much welcome. And I see lots of developments there. And I think the examples that was given by Sita today with the sealing of messages, I must say the work that is currently being done by GLEIF on the verifiable LEI, the VLEI, is certainly also an avenue that is worth looking into, because one of the main obstacles that we can see for the adoption of LEI today is that companies do not see any benefit for themselves. They see it for the regulators because we ask reporting with LEIs and so on, but they don't see very much an advantage for themselves or benefit. And that could also boost benefit for legal entities beyond the financial reporting. And that should be also looked at very carefully and very, very promisingly. Thank you. Sorry, I've been a bit long, but thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Francois. Well, related to the question to Guillermo, well, when you try to implement your system, have you encountered any sort of objection from your supplier, or they are also happy to get the LEI and also the follow your instruction through the system?
Yeah, very good question. Indeed, this is maybe the main block part. I think, yes, in some cases, especially when you deal with the small amount of supplier, it's not worth to do it. But in other cases, yes, we have to ask suppliers to disclose their LEI and show them the advantages of doing that. And I think that, yeah, this is maybe the main question that we are facing from suppliers, but that's where we are also fighting or supporting GLEIF in the way the LEI is adopted, is broadly adopted by corporates. And I think, as Laurent said, yeah, this is the main point, and that's the reason we at CITA want to share this experience, because I think we can show the advantages or the benefits for corporates of having a LEI. Even for us, we were used to have only a few LEIs for our main entities, but now we spread the LEI numbers to many other entities, and also doing that, we hope as well that the cost of maintaining LEIs will decrease, and the LEI will be something used by corporates in a very natural way and with a reduced cost as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, that's really the next challenge.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, Francois, allow me to raise this question. Actually, this was raised yesterday. So do you see any sort of implication from the recent failure of Archegos Capital in United States? So that is not the OTC derivative, I suppose, but I mean the sort of lack of identifying various high-risk leverage transaction created a lot of losses to the various financial institutions. And well, at this point, the OTC derivative transaction is only sort of mandated to report together with the LEI. But the recent case also shows the possibility, or I mean the usefulness of LEI if we can expand. But do you see any sort of implication or discussion in the European regulatory community?
Yeah, as I said, there is a lot of interest in the regulatory community to also get the LEI as part of the regulations. But we always have the dilemma between asking for it when it's available and therefore not forcing it, or forcing it, but therefore being subject to criticism regarding proportionality and other things. And there is always this pendulum between the two. ESMA has been very brave and very, very good in asking for LEI to be mandatory in a number of their regulations and not to be MiFID. And I think it's it's unfortunately the only way to at this stage to really get a real boost and promotion of the LEI. Asking it when it's available is of course good and should be promoted as much as possible, but it may not lead us far enough, and that's why we took that view that we need to go a step further, and the step further is really to come with this recommendation of the ESRB to say, okay, we have seen that mandatory adoption creates a burst, which is good, but it's not sustained in time if we don't have it across the board, completely harmonized across all the authorities and all the supervisors and regulators. So that's why we want to take it globally, have a EU legislation on that requires the LEI for every legal entity in Europe. And I see that as the only way to move forward, unless there is really something else that creates so much appetite and so much benefits for the users that of course I will jump on it. But as I said, the case of CETA is very good and very illustrative of what could be benefits, but those cases needs to be further developed, and we have to move in the meantime. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm conscious of time, so I guess the next session, well, tomorrow's webinar, I think the Indian case may give us some sort of insight how regulators decisively decided to introduce LEI in various financial transactions. So I believe that's going to be a very interesting case. Actually, India and China are the leading cases, and these two Asian countries can give us sort of the background, how things can be changed. So that will be the next webinar, so the July 2nd, 4 p.m. Manila time. Is there any, if there's no further question, or I would like to close today's webinar, but please send us your questions if you have, and we are happy to respond via email. Okay, so thank you, Francois and Guillermo, Ivan, for your kind presentation. Do you have any final word, maybe Francois?
Yes, thank you. No, final word, just again to thank the organizers of this seminar, to thank the audience for their time with us. And I've provided in my slides my contacts. So if there is any further question you would like to ask, of course, through the organizers, but any contact you would want to have later on LEI and other matters, I'm very happy to have that. So thanks again to the organizers for that.
Thank you. So Guillermo?
Yeah, thank you to the Asian Development Bank, thanks to GLEIF. And again, we are more than glad to share this experience with other colleagues, with other counterparties. And it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that worth really the fight, because we are talking about payment fraud, we are talking about digital fraud, and if we don't work together, if we don't make this effort all together, we won't win the fight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you so much, all the participants, and we will have another round of webinar. Thank you so much for your participation. Please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.